Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another broadcast, Zoom broadcast of Garden Hour, our replacement of Garden Line, for those that do remember that show. And here, as with that, you have a panel of experts who are here to try to answer your questions, as well as direct your questions if we're not able to answer them, and also give you an update as to what's going on around the state in our various areas of expertise. So my name is John Ball. I'm the Extension Forestry Specialist for South Dakota State University, and I'm also the Forest Health Specialist for the South Dakota Department of Ag and Natural Resources. And tonight I'm going to be talking to you about, well, where we are in plant development for the season, and then talk to you about some of the problems that I'm seeing currently, and then also answer your questions. And then somewhere about midstream, we're going to have Christina from McCrory Gardens do her McCrory Gardens Minute and update us on items that are there. But we also have two other panelists tonight. So Amanda.
Hi, yep, Amanda Bachman. I'm the Pesticide Education and Urban Entomology Field Specialist for SDSU Extension based in Pierre. And I'll be going over some garden pests that have been popping out this week, as well as pollinators and just some cool insects that I've seen in my backyard when I've been out watering.
And then with us today, we also have Rhoda Burrows. So Rhoda, what are you going to talk to us about tonight?
Hi, I'm Rhoda Burrows, Horticulture Extension Specialist, mostly with fruit and vegetables. And tonight I'm going to be talking about some of the things that we're seeing out in the gardens, and actually quite a few of the ornamental issues. I'm also a plant pathologist, so we're going to be talking a little bit about viruses, and then we're going to be talking about some of the outcome of this heat that we've been having.
All right, well, thank you, Rhoda, and I'll get us started tonight. So if I can have my slides up, please, Amanda. All right. Well, first of all, I want to talk about where we're at in terms of plant development. And you know what? Our season started slow. Some of you remember the snow we had in May, which isn't too surprising in South Dakota. By the way, that's happened for the last 2 years in a row. Some real cold snaps there. And we also had a very warm, relatively speaking, April. And so what happened is the temperatures kind of went down and up and back and forth. But where we're at right now is catalpas are blooming in Brookings, and as well as a number of other areas as I'm traveling the state. And when you take a look at our growing degree days, we're just about where we need to be or should be. In other words, for a typical year, our plant development is just about where it typically is at. Now, what that means is our temperatures are kind of evening out. When we take a look at our accumulation of warm temperatures, we've kind of hit what we normally are at this time of year. Moisture, no. Those catalpas you're looking at here look pretty nice, but I can also see an awful lot of catalpas in parched catalpas that are wilting away and lawns that have already turned completely yellow. So one of the issues we have, we'll discuss tonight, is moisture. But if I can go to my next slide. I want to talk about a couple of things that are going on. And first of all, you know, it's what, 95 degrees everywhere. Some of you are at near 100. Out here in Custer today, it was extremely hot, but so I'm going to start out and talk about winter injury. How's that? Give you something to think about. Now, you take a look and you go, winter injury. When did that happen? Actually, it was last fall injury. We had a cold snap, which, by the way, also occurred in Nebraska. And a lot of our trees that had not shut down yet, it was a very mild fall, if you recall. That it was dry, so that doesn't help plants harden for the winter. That stress also is going to make it so that it's more difficult for them to actually prepare for winter. And then we really didn't have a cold snap until October, late October, and then it snapped. And we have a lot of trees, such as maples, ash, by the way. A lot of my EAB calls, emerald ash calls, are not with emerald ash borer. They're just ash that are leafing out late again. And then we're also seeing that with a number of other trees. And then remember the May frost we had, and that just caught ash and hackberries as they were leafing out. And a lot of them have rebudded and are leafing out again here. So we're looking at two problems. Winter injury, by that October cold snap, which killed tissue. And so a lot of trees have died back. And, we're seeing the trees that are doing this most are a lot of our marginally hardy plants. Bur oak, not a problem. It shuts down early, gets up late. But a lot of our trees that grow a little late into the year, and we had some brilliant fall color last fall, weren't ready for winter, and the drought didn't help them. And then, of course, that May cold snap. If you'd already leafed out, you were fine. And if you hadn't leafed out yet, you were fine. But we had a number of trees, usually those ones that are kind of in the middle, hackberries and ash, that were just starting to leaf out. And so right now, people are calling me, my hackberry looks horrible. I think somebody sprayed. Well, somebody may have, but actually you can think back to the frost. The other one, and I did talk about this 2 weeks ago, pine wilt is becoming a major problem. And I want to point out that we have confirmed pine wilt disease in Aberdeen, South Dakota, which essentially means it's throughout the state. No matter where you're watching this in South Dakota, if you have a Scots pine tree, it is vulnerable to pine wilt disease. This disease, which came from the south, it's a nematode, and a nematode is really native to southeastern United States, gradually moved its way up, and it doesn't kill our native pines, but it kills our exotic pines, and predominantly Scots pines and Austrian pines, and occasionally a very large mughal pine will be killed by this. But you're looking at a tree that I looked at in Aberdeen, South Dakota about a week or so ago. And when I looked at it, I mean, it was completely yellow. And I went up there and snapped a twig to it. And it was like, yep, this is pine wilt. We took samples to confirm it. And yes, indeed, the nematode was present. The pine wood nematode was present. You can always find nematodes in trees, but this particular one. And when I started looking at the weather records, no surprise on a hot day like today, it's been gradually getting warmer in Aberdeen. In other words, as you go farther north in our state, it's not staying cool summers or relatively cool. Our temperatures are warming. And this nematode really likes the temperatures warm. And so it's moved north. It's not going to move south again. So Scots pines and Austrian pines, we are losing them now throughout the state due to pine wilt. So let's go from major threats to minor threats. And the other one up here is maple bladder gall mite. I see those little dots on the leaves. And in the last couple of weeks, I've received lots of leaf pictures. And they say, well, what are all these bumps on the leaves and what do I spray? There are no sprays to take bumps out of leaves. So once they're there, they're there. The good news is, believe it or not, they do not harm the tree. That maple leaf would make just as much food with those bumps as without those bumps. And I've seen these and basswoods and hackberries, just some leaves covered with bumps from the various mites and insects that create these. And why they sometimes look bad, it's really not harming them. And so these are not things we typically treat for. There are treatments out there, but really it's not going to, they're not going to affect your plant. Spraying insecticides might cause other pests to develop because you're killing what's eating them. So these are ones that, I just say leave alone. Now, by the way, these maple bladder galls will actually turn color during the season. They go from a green to a red to a yellow to a black. Oh my gosh, they're almost ornamental. So you know what? Don't really worry about them. Well, that's it for the 2 slides there. And so I'll take a look at questions. And then I do have one here that says, can you send pictures? And you bet you can always send pictures by phone or by email, and I will be more than happy to ID it. Now, I will say I always like these as two pictures. Close up showing the leaf and the leaf on the twig, so I can take a look at how the arrangement is and the leaf, and then a picture further back so I get the whole plant. And I will say I really like pictures, not video. Trees don't move. Don't send videos. That kind of just clogs up our bandwidth there. But more than happy to help answer those questions. Another question here, for trees that have winter injuries, what can be done? Right now is just prune off the dead. And now you can prune off the dead. A month ago, I would have told you to wait. And my reasoning for that is that sometimes some of this tissue that appears dead will leaf out a little late. But if it hasn't leafed out yet, we're in the middle of June now, then you can pretty much assume it's not coming back. And so summer is an okay time to prune, particularly when you're pruning out dead wood. So if it's safe for you to do so, get out there and prune it. If it's too large of a plant, certainly there we would encourage you to hire a tree service rather than going out and attempting to prune that yourself. Well, the other thing I want to spend a few minutes on is the need for watering. I get calls. I've had probably 5 calls today from people saying my spruce do not look very good. The needles are turning a little off color. What can I spray? It's very easy, H2O and on the ground. And I know everybody likes rules of thumb, and rules of thumbs are made to be broken. But a good rule of thumb right now is take the diameter of your tree at about 4 to 5 feet. So you take the diameter at 4 to 5 feet. And let's say it's a 10-inch tree. You multiply the inches in diameter times 15, and that's going to give you how many gallons of water that tree needs. So a 10-inch tree, 150 gallons of water is what it needs. And preferably it's going to get that water as a slow soak, that you just put a hose out there or a sprinkler and you let it run for about 30 minutes, not on high, but on low. So it's going to soak into the ground. We don't want it to run off. And so evening or early morning, and early morning's probably preferred. And you're going to do that a couple of times a week. Now, I realize some people will say, I can't afford that much water, or I just can't do that much. And I recognize that. But the point is, your trees need that. We are not getting adequate rains across much of the state. We're getting little spits of rain. And if you're not getting an inch of rain a week right now, your trees are going backwards. So if you can, and if you don't have too many trees, get out there and start watering them through the month of June. Typically, June is really one of our wetter months. And I know in a few areas we did kind of catch up in May, and the rains came through enough. But by and large, we're a little too dry. And if anyone remembers Laura's comments as our climatologist, that this summer was predicted to be a hotter and drier than normal year. So I'm afraid we're in for it. And for anyone who has seedlings out there in a windbreak, absolutely. Every seedling needs about a pint to a quarter of water each watering. And if they went in this spring, those trees right now need to be watered 2 or 3 times a week. One of the things I'm looking at is a lot of new trees and belts that are not really getting started because nobody's watered them. They went in dry and nobody's watered them since. And that's not going to work for trees this year. So throughout the state, we're seeing probably our biggest problem with trees right now is moisture stress. And our only control for it, or only management for it, is get out that garden hose. And if you're not having water restrictions, try to get out there and do some watering. So that's the bad news for me. The big things that we do need to work on, and I kid you not, watering's it. But now I'm going to turn it over to Amanda, and I don't know what the dryness is doing for the bug world, But hopefully the bugs aren't enjoying it. But enlighten us on how the drought is affecting our insects. I know for trees, it makes them more vulnerable to attack, but please tell me insects don't like dry weather and they're dying like flies, no pun intended. So it's
Well,
all yours.
I'll say the milkweed in my yard is blooming and the insects seem to really love it. So let's see here. I've got my screen sharing. All right. So we're going to start out with pests first of all. My colleague Adam Varenhorst is based in Brookings and has a fairly extensive garden, and he is sort of my canary in a coal mine when it comes to garden pests. If there is something that's going to show up in South Dakota gardens, it seems to hit his yard first. So he has a fairly extensive planting of zucchinis and pumpkins, and he just noticed squash vine borers showing up this week. These are actually a moth, and the picture of the adult is here on the left. And they're actually a very striking, sort of unique looking moth. A lot of people think that they're wasps based off of sort of their body shape and coloration. They do have one pair of clear wings, so they are in the clearwing moth family, the Ciceids, which is pretty cool. But they can be fairly destructive if you have a lot of them and you are particularly fond of your pumpkins. The females lay their eggs around the base of the squash stems, and they do prefer larger stemmed cucurbits. So the zucchinis, the pumpkins, the winter squashes, they don't, your little like melons and cucumbers aren't as preferred as the big cucurbita. And I did spend a lot of time with these guys in graduate school. So when Adam was having issues with them, I was like, oh, let me just dig up everything that I did in central Pennsylvania like 10 years ago. But yeah, so they lay their eggs at the base of the stem, the eggs hatch, and then the caterpillar burrows inside of the stem. And this is what the caterpillar looks like. And you can see it kind of surrounded by some of the frass or the insect poop that it creates as it feeds. And since those caterpillars are feeding inside the stem, it makes them uniquely sort of difficult to control. It's not going to be feasible to use some sort of systemic insecticide that's not going to be good for your harvestability. And then you've got this really short window when they're eggs, and then when they hatch and burrow in the stem, like there's a short window where you can hit them with an insecticide. But really, if you've got a sort of reasonable or small number of squash and pumpkins, you can check those stems for the eggs, and you can also keep an eye out for the adult moths to see if you actually have a problem. One thing that I noticed when I was doing research on them is that they were very spotty. Like the research farm where I was doing my experiment, we didn't have a lot of squash vine borers. Like 3 states away in Kentucky, our collaborators were just inundated with them. And even, within the landscape, in Pennsylvania, and within the landscape here in South Dakota, just because your neighbor has them, you may not. If you do notice one of your cucurbit stems kind of going downhill and you see that there's this frass sort of coming out of the base of it, you have a fairly, good idea that, yeah, you've got a squash vine borer caterpillar in there. You can cut off that stem, and depending on the size of the plant, it might be able to sort of handle that damage. You can, destroy the caterpillar and you're just sort of down one, fruiting body of the plant, and the rest of it can continue on. We all know that our cucurbits tend to be pretty prolific. So sometimes the loss of one vine doesn't really hurt it too badly. If you do have a problem with these year after year, definitely look into how you're disposing of your cucurbit waste from the garden, because these will drop out of the stem once they're sort of finished developing, and they will pupate in the soil. So sometimes crop rotation will help solve your problem, or maybe just taking a year off from planting those big cucurbits. So that's squash vine borer, and I could talk for probably my entire 15-minute segment about them because I know too much. I will move on to a turf pest that Patrick Wagner, my colleague in Rapid City, has been seeing and getting some calls about in his area. It's the sod webworm. And honestly, this is one that I haven't encountered here in Pierre, so I don't have a lot of firsthand experience with it. But it is one of our little sort of skinny moss that holds their wings in sort of this tube shape, and they kind of have a little snout. So if you're walking through your grass or you're mowing and you see sort of a lot of movement, a lot of activity, you might be having some sod webworms. It was funny, the article that Pat wrote about them, said that like drought stressed lawns are, sort of, additionally susceptible to damage from sod webworms. And I'm like, dude, I'm not watering my lawn this year. So if I have sod webworms, like they might just starve. But that is another critter that we have been seeing. And let's see, just checking in on the chat real quick. How big is the sod? Good question, Rhoda. The sod webworms, the adult moths are fairly small, maybe like a quarter of an inch, half an inch-ish. And then since they hold their wings in that tube, they're very slender. So not like sort of the bigger, chunkier moths like the squash vine borer, which is, about half an inch and sort of very solid. But the fun things that I wanted to talk about for most of my time were the pollinators. I think this is pollinator week, or it might actually technically be next week. But for me, this is pollinator week because I will be at McCrory Gardens on Thursday for the third Thursday talking about pollinators in the garden. And I'm very excited to see the gardens in person for what seems like the first time in probably over a year at this point, and check out the perennials and see what's flying around, and see what I can get some pictures of. And so here are two examples from my backyard. And I got to tell you, it has been a struggle this year to get things flowering just because it's been so dry. I've been focusing my watering efforts on my perennials and my vegetables. I do have a lot of common milkweed that comes up sort of on its own, and I let it volunteer sort of throughout my yard. And those are about half the size that they were that last year. So the winter conditions that John talked about, I can definitely see how those took a toll on, some of the perennials in my yard. So they're about half the size. They started flowering what seems like just a little bit earlier than usual. But the bees and the butterflies have been very appreciative of that nectar resource. And I feel kind of bad that the blanket flower is about the only other thing that I have in bloom right now for them. So you can see on my blanket flower, we have one of the longhorn bees, such named because of its long antennae. And one of the cool things about pollinators is, this includes bees, butterflies, wasps, beetles, anything that's moving pollen from flower to flower. So it's not just honeybees, it's not just bumblebees. And a lot of times when we think about pollinators, we think of bees and we think about honeybees and bumblebees as being the only ones. So I would encourage you, if you've got things flowering in your backyard, to go take a look, especially, around, evening hours, 8 to 9 p.m. out here in Pierre, at least, because it's light forever. Is when I see a lot of really good activity. And that's also when the sun is low enough that I don't cast a shadow, so I can sneak up on the insects pretty easily and get their pictures, because they are much more interested in the flowers than they are in me. So this longhorn bee was having a great time in the blanket flower. We did have kind of a little bit of cloud cover on Sunday, and this bumblebee, this was in the morning, and she was just pretty much like taking a nap, hanging out on that milkweed leaf. And if you notice your bumblebees, you'll notice that there's some really big ones buzzing around. Those are the queens, and then the smaller ones are the workers from the nests that have been established this spring and are sort of getting up to their full summer strength. So there've just been some really, really cool critters around, and I have enjoyed sneaking up on them. Other resources for pollinators. So John talked about, water for trees. Our bees and butterflies also need water resources as well. If you have a bird bath or a water feature in your yard, maybe put a big stone in the middle of your bird bath, have some sort of island there so that insects that get kind of sucked in, because honeybees will fall in bird baths all the time because they're looking for water and then they end up drowning. So have a way for insects to crawl out of there. Maybe take a look at your water feature and see if you've got, sort of an insect death zone, and, maybe add some life rafts for them so that they can recover. But yeah, insects will be definitely using those water resources as well. Butterflies will do a thing called puddling, where they'll go to puddles or sort of exposed bare soil that is moist in order to pick up minerals. So if you have an area in your yard, some people will sort of artificially create these in gardens by making, sort of digging out and like, filling kind of a dish with a sandier mix of soil and keeping it kind of wet or moist. Or if you have an area in your yard that is sort of already naturally kind of wet, that can be a nice way to add a puddling feature for the butterflies that might be hanging around your yard. And I did want to just throw out a really cool insect that I saw in my yard last night. I was in the process of actually picking off some pests from my milkweed. The longhorn milkweed beetles have gotten a little bit out of control at my house this year, and they've been skeletonizing some of my milkweed, which is kind of a scarce resource. So I've been thinning out their population by hand. And I noticed this really awesome moth that was flying around, and I have never seen it before, did not know what it was. So I took a bunch of pictures and then looked it up later to figure it out. And it is apparently the 8-spotted forester moth. So it had these very distinct yellow spots on the forewings and then white on the hindwings and those orange tufts on the legs. So the color is not, super crisp because this was at like 9 o'clock at night. So the sun was, very much, below sort of the horizon at my place, and it was sort of the last light. But just a really neat thing that, if you've got stuff that's blooming, spend some time just sitting out there, taking a look at what's around. And I think you'll be really surprised by the amount of diversity that you may already have in your yard. And then as you add some resources for those pollinators, like I know I've got a hole as far as early blooming plants in the spring right now. And so that's what I've been focusing on adding to my yard. And just this year, it's just a struggle to keep things blooming. But filling those holes so that you've got pollen and nectar resources throughout the entire growing season. And you'll see sort of even more nifty things showing up in your yard. So that's what I've got for slides. But I can take a look at the chat and see if there are any questions in the Q&A.
Amanda, there's a question about dragonflies. Are they considered pollinators?
Okay, so dragonflies are definitely not considered pollinators. They are predators all the way. They are predators when they are nymphs in the water, and they are predators as adults. And what's great about them, though, is that they catch their prey on the wing. So as you see them flying around, they're going after, mosquitoes, flies, pretty much anything smaller than them that they can catch. I've always been amazed at the diversity of dragonflies and damselflies in South Dakota. It was not a thing I was expecting when I showed up in Pierre, but I always see such, absolutely cool insects that use, the Missouri River and other, water in our environment as part of their life cycle. So not pollinators, but cool and beneficial in other ways. Let's see. I don't see any other questions that are pollinator related, but I do see that we've got Christina is here and she is up next. So Christina, if you are ready, I can pass things on to you for the McCrory Garden update. Hey, all right.
Hi. Sure.
Let me get your slides back. All right, take it away.
Okay, so just another update of what's going on this week at McCrory Gardens. Again, the Books and Bloom and Growing Gardeners, our kids program is still open every week. So we love to get more, more fun kids coming, and it's been a really fun program so far. So if you're interested in joining that at any point, we do have an online registration, or you can call in too before you come, just so we know you're coming. And as Amanda mentioned, we have her coming just this week to talk about pollinators. So I'm really excited about that presentation too. You can go on to the next one. Oh, and I do want to mention, I guess is that we are done with our planting as an update too. So for sort of not so much the events, but on the garden side update, we have planted most of our annuals out there. There, all the big beds have been planted. Now we're just kind of doing little pockets of perennials and things like that. So if you want to see annuals, they're looking really, really lovely right now, and all filled in. And then we also planted a kind of a neat new collection, a Mangave collection over by the rock garden, which is kind of this new plant that has been sort of popular thing for breeding and introduction. So if you want to check that out, that's over by our waterfall in our perennial garden. And then yeah, so some things in bloom this week. There's so much out there that it's almost hard to choose every week what to show you guys, but the roses are kind of in full bloom right now. So there on the top are some really beautiful ones. The first edition's Campfire Rose, and you can see they have sort of complicated cultivar names. So I'm just going by kind of the brand name that you'd find it in the store would be the first edition's Campfire Rose on the top. You can see that on one plant, it just has all these colors from kind of yellow to pink to kind of a deep pink. And it's just really been a nice, consistent bloomer for us that's blooming right now. So fun to see. And then on the bottom, that's the My Girl Rose. It's an Easy Elegance rose. And these are all shrub roses. They're all on their own roots or anything. They're not the tea type roses or anything. But these, the My Girl Rose, that's another one that I've been a huge fan of this one for a long time, because you can see that the foliage, the leaves of the plant are always this glossy green. They don't sort of get kind of the yellowish look that some, and get a lot of problems that roses might get. So I've always been a really big fan of that. Plus it blooms for so long. So that's a rose that I really enjoy. And again, all these photos were taken today. So then poppies, our poppies are still blooming. They've been blooming a few days now, or this week, and especially like the oriental poppies here. Answer the top one, I actually couldn't find the exact cultivar. I think it was from a mix that we had in place, but boy, they're really beautiful. So those are a fun one to see out in the garden right now too. Go on to the next one, please. And then, well, one of these John Ball, Dr. Ball already mentioned, but up on the top right, we do have the mock orange. That's a first edition Snow White. And when you walk over there, it's just, you can smell it right away. In like, especially today, kind of the breeze was blowing it. And it was just a really nice blooming shrub right now. And then the Northern Catalpa tree, that's just, it's kind of stuck out in the Arboretum between some other trees, and you just see these glowing flowers and giant blossoms on it. And I've seen a lot of questions that people asking, what is this tree blooming right now? Well, we do have that at the gardens too. But like I said, there's so much blooming out there. It's hard to select which ones to show you guys every week. So definitely come check out the gardens and see what's blooming. And because always see the next new thing blooming, and check out the different activities that we'll have coming up as well. So yeah, do you guys have any questions for me at all?
Christina, there's one in the Q&A about what's the new plant, and if you can spell it.
The which plant? The new plant?
Yes, I think the one that you were talking about very first, right before the roses.
Oh, the roses. So in the roses, there was one called New Girl. And so that's just on the last slide, I think it's spelled out. It's a Rosa. No, that one's Easy Elegance, I think. No, that one's first edition's New Girl.
I'll go back to the roses.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, Easy Elegance, My Girl. And maybe that's the one, or the new one.
I know, it's like, what did you say very first?
I might have mentioned a lot of new ones, but I don't remember which one that would be, because there's a lot of really cool new ones blooming out there. I guess the first edition's Campfire Rose has been new in the last few years, if I might have mentioned that. But yeah. I don't know. Anyone's sure? I'm
Like,
not
sorry,
sure.
everybody. Apparently, our memory is about 5 minutes as well.
Yeah. Okay. Well, please let us know if I answered that question, because I'm happy to try to answer that for you. Yeah, there's
another question about from Rachel Johnson, who went to a session at McCrory Gardens on utilizing herbs. The presenter mentioned an herb bread recipe. Did you ever get that from her? Is
let
it
me
available
follow up with
somewhere?
her. I don't have it, but let me follow up with her because I could send her an email and get that recipe. That was a fun class. Yeah. So yep, I think I have your contact information too. So I'll look for that, but write a little note for myself.
And an update on the first plant you talked. It was before the roses. It wasn't a rose. It started with an M.
Was it a mock orange? No, that was before. Oh no, before the rose. Did you go to the slide before this? Would you be able to do that?
I can, but I don't think you did. You have a slide before the? No, it was just
Oh
the
no, I
what's happening.
didn't. Oh, Mangaves. That's what I mentioned. Yep.
Okay.
So it's like a agave hybrid basically that they've created that's over in the rock garden. And so it's kind of like a succulent that we've planted out, and you can look on, I think Walter's Gardens has a huge collection of them. They're kind of in a breeding frenzy of all these new cultivars and whatnot with Mangaves. But yeah, they look a little bit like agaves to me. So yeah, that would be
think I found doing Google off on the side here. So I think that's looks about right.
Yep. So it's spelled Mangave. So yep, they're a hybrid of agave, and yeah, so they're neat. They're kind of a neat little succulent plant that is great for xeriscaping and stuff like that, or planting in sort of drought areas. And yep, it is Walter's Gardens that has a huge. So if you look at waltersgardens.com, you'll find or just Google Mangave. Usually it'll come up, but they have a lot of really neat varieties to look at, or come visit the gardens, of course, and see them in person.
Yeah, I'm totally gonna have to look for that on Thursday when I'm out there. I cannot wait to see just everything out there.
I can't wait too.
Like,
do a mini tour.
Yeah, and odds are good. It's it's gonna be hot and sunny, which means there'll be lots of things out. So.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yep, there's definitely pollinators and insects out everywhere that you go. When I was taking the pictures, sometimes I try to catch them in a photo because they seem to always be around. So
well, cool, awesome. Thank you for the update. I'm glad we got to Mangave. I put the link to the Walters Gardens that I Googled in the chat. So if you were looking for that, you can go ahead and check that out. And I think now we will switch over to Rhoda Burrows and the plant and plant disease update.
Right. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Christina.
Yeah.
So we've been having some samples start to come in across the state, and this, not this particular plant, but one like it came in on peonies. And you'll notice the bizarre kind of pattern on it. It's not, we've got green, dark green within lighter green within darker green, not browning, but a modeling of both yellow and dark green tissue. And this showed up on my peonies at home about 3-4 years ago. And I had a sample sent over to the disease clinic in Brookings because I knew it was a virus of some type, and I wanted to find out what one it was. And this was what it came back as, was tobacco rattle virus, also known as the peony ring spot virus, because it is on peonies a lot. and it actually does show up on tobacco, but usually is asymptomatic. So the tobacco has it, but it doesn't really seem to do a whole lot on the tobacco. But it does show up on the peonies, and it does make them less vigorous. But this thing has a host range of over 400 species. And I've listed just a few of the ornamentals that we see it on: bleeding heart, columbine, delphinium, hostas, irises. So across a whole range of plant families. It does show up on potatoes, and on potatoes, you don't see it on leaves, but it makes this kind of mottling in the middle of the tuber. And so it can destroy your tubers. So it will show up in potatoes, and you won't know it until you cut open the potato. This is spread. It can be spread mechanically. So if your peony is like this and you decide to cut it down, don't go and trim the rest of your deadhead, your petunias or your delphiniums or something with the same tools without cleaning them in between. It can also be spread. One of the main ways it's spread in the field is by a little nematode. And I'm not sure where it came in on. My peonies, I've planted all kinds of stuff from all kinds of different sources. So the peonies had been there for many, many years. So I don't think the peonies were the culprit. I think it came in on some ornamental that I planted next to it. So what do you do about it? You dig it up and destroy it. You can't cure viruses. You may be able to do that in people, but not in plants. So with plants, we just have to dig them up and discard them. And you want to do that really as soon as you notice this, because with 400 species, it can spread to the rest of your ornamentals. And on some ornamentals, the plant has it, but you don't see it. So that may have been where it came in on mine, on some plant that didn't show it, but actually was able to spread it then to my peonies. Can come in on tulips. So a number of sources for that. So it's one of those odds and ends. As a plant pathologist, we always have fun with these really bizarre looking patterns, because whenever you see something like that, you know you're dealing with a virus. Fungi and bacteria don't do that. Cold weather doesn't do it. Viruses are about the only thing that can do that. Next slide, please. So talking about heat effects, and the picture of the broccoli, we had a description of something like this come in. Didn't actually have the picture, but broccoli likes it cool and consistently cool. So northern Minnesota is a great climate for it. South Dakota in a good year can do quite well. In a year like this, where the temperatures are up and down, part of the head starts to flower and the other part is behind it. So South Dakota can be kind of a gamble with these cool season crops like broccoli and cauliflower. The question was, should I go ahead and harvest it or leave it? You might as well go ahead and harvest it, and you probably can still use this, but you want to use it pretty quickly. The other question we get almost every year is, why didn't my radishes bulb out? Radishes seem to be, one of those really easy vegetables to grow. We give them to kids a lot because they form the bulb, they can harvest them within a month or 5 or 6 weeks. So it's good for little kids, but not when it doesn't form the bulb. How disappointing. So heat can cause that, and that's one of the reasons why this time of year we'll probably hold off on planting radishes now until it cools off a little bit more in the fall. Or if you do plant them, maybe put them in a container where they can get shade during the like 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock time of day, sun time, when they get a little bit of relief from the heat. The other thing that can cause is even during cooler temperatures, if you're planting these too close together, radishes should have, 2-3 inches between them. So if you planted them thickly, and kids have a way of doing that, you need to go in and thin them. Otherwise, they'll stay like this. And of course, the other thing we see with heat effects is lettuce or kale or any of our cole crops going to seed or forming that flower head. And once that starts, usually whatever's left here at the bottom gets kind of bitter tasting. So once your lettuce goes to seed like this, you get a bitter lettuce. Arugula is another one that will, in the heat, really go quickly to seed. So this is the time of year we want to try to avoid having those cold season crops coming to maturity, because it is very easy for them to just go ahead and bolt. And so we rely on our warmer season crops from now until next month, mid to late July. We'll start replanting some of these cooler ones again. And that's okay when they're first very young, but when they come into maturity, is when they can be really sensitive to this heat. Next slide, please. So this was one that I hear a lot from people about. The problem with your leaf is that the water droplets, you overhead watered and there are water droplets, and then the sun shone and that acted as a magnifying glass and caused damage. Well, if you look at these little droplets, you can see they do actually act as a magnifying glass. And they actually did a study with this new phytologist, is a very heavy duty scientific literature journal. And so they published this study where they took water droplets and put them of various sizes on different kinds of leaves. And what they found was that on smooth leafed plants like a ginkgo or this maple, as long as the droplet has good contact with the leaf itself, the droplet is cooling the leaf. So whatever effect the sun may have is offset by the fact that the water is cooling the plant. So you did not see any sunburn from water droplets on smooth leaf plants. I see the same thing with tomatoes. I can have water droplets on tomatoes, and I've never seen any sunburn on tomato plants. They're a little rough, but not real rough. They took some other plants that had very hairy leaves, like this African violet, and they found that if the plant hairs were thick enough, that droplet was actually standing on top of the little hairs and wasn't actually contacting the epidermis of the plant. So it was sitting up here, and then it actually could act as a magnifying glass and didn't have the cooling power because it wasn't actually touching the epidermis. And they found that with those really thick haired plants, that they actually could get some sunburn from the water droplets. So there's your answer. Do water droplets on leaves allow the sun to burn the plant? Our famous reply, it depends on the plant. And that's what I have for you today. I know we had some more questions.
Yeah, Rhoda, there's a lot of questions that came into the Q&A for you. So we'll take it from the top. First one for you was, when should you stop harvesting asparagus? Should we stop earlier this year because of the drought?
And I'm going to say it depends. This is, well, in a normal year, you might go towards the end of June. If you've got a good water supply and can keep watering, you can keep harvesting as long as you're getting good thick stems. Once you get those really spindly stems, you should stop, because that means the plant has pretty much exhausted its resources and we need to start replenishing those.
Next question is from someone who would like to add more perennials to their shade garden. When's the best time to do that? She's considering planting coral bells and astilbe?
Astilbe.
Astilbe?
Yeah. If they're containerized and if they're in the shade where you can keep them moist, you can probably still plant them. I probably wouldn't divide them at this point, but you know, if they've got a good intact root system, you could probably go ahead and not have any problems.
And then the final question for you so far is, does the tobacco rattle virus make vegetables like spinach inedible?
I would have to look that one up specifically. I know it was listed as a host, but one thing I should say is with viruses like that, if it's going to make it inedible, it would probably cause it to become bitter or something like that, that you would know right away. It's not going to be something that's going to poison you.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say, I'm like, plant viruses, yeah, usually make it just look unappealing or maybe impact quality, but it's not like a virus that we can get.
Right, right. And I think that's it for our questions here today.
I've got one here that John said that he wanted to answer live, and then I also have the information for contacting the SDSU garden hotline. So I'll throw that up really quick before I hand it back over to John. But I just wanted to give a shout out to the Extension garden hotlines in Aberdeen, Rapid City, and Sioux Falls. Their contact information is posted. If you are near one of those places, or even if you're not, you can give them a call during non-garden hour hours, and they will either answer your question or they will kick it up the chain to one of us, and maybe it'll show up in a future garden hour presentation. And I will then also throw in the chat some other ways to get your questions answered outside of garden hour, but I will stop sharing and turn it back over to John.
All right. Well, hey, thanks, Amanda, and great show as always. Hey, we do have a couple more questions. One of them was that I did want to make sure I answered on here, and that is, what about pruning evergreens right now? If I prune them beyond the green, in other words, I'm just left with branches, no foliage, will that work? No, we don't even need to do a depend on it. It doesn't work. Evergreens can only be pruned back to where they still have green tissue. In other words, by that, I mean needles. Pruning them back beyond that, they do not sprout from adventitious buds and that, as do our deciduous plant materials. So pruning back your lilacs and such will work, though at this time of year, we do not recommend pruning in that way. Our shaping of our shrubs really took place earlier this year. On evergreens, and it's a fairly common question, so I appreciate someone asking that, is that no, you can't cut them back. You can shear off some of the new growth, but that's it. And if the plant's too big, then really what that takes is a chainsaw and a pickup truck and a chain to pull it out and start over again. Seriously, that's about it. But well, we have a few more minutes, and Rhoda, I loved your question, or your answer to the continual question: can we burn our plants with water spots? It kind of made me think, well, what if I've got a hairy arm and that water droplet stands up? Should that mean I should avoid the beach? Will I now become sunburned in spots? You know, that's one of those things that they've, at least with trees on evergreens, they've looked at it and said no. But then again, they have smooth needles, so that wouldn't be an issue. And someone asked a little bit more on that question. I'm gonna let Rhoda take it away, but since we brought up watering plants, let us all remind everyone they have this wonderful ability to absorb it through their root system. So watering the canopy can cool it, much as it does with us, but it's not necessary. And I often hear that, well, you need to water the tops of your evergreens. And no, not at all. Water the root system of the evergreens to get them to live. But I didn't quite read the whole question, but I saw there was another question on your water droplet thing. So Rhoda, if you can see that question, I'd like you to kind of answer that here in our remaining few minutes.
Yeah, it was just confirming, is it that the drop touching the leaf surface cools it? Well, if the drop is held up on the leaf hairs, not touching the leaf surface, that's where it could possibly cause sun damage. And these researchers did all kinds of different questions about the size of the water droplet, and they used actually tap water, which is probably what would be spraying on our plants. But they looked at different angles of the light. So what if it's noon as opposed to 10 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the afternoon? The hypothesis was, well, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, maybe you get more burning because it's hitting at a different angle. And they found out that that didn't make any difference. What made the difference was whether that droplet was actually contacting the actual surface of the leaf.
Well, that's certainly an interesting one. And again, I kind of like that. But may I ask what journal that was in?
New Phytologist.
Oh, cool. All right. I got to look at that one because that's kind of like,
link.
Please do, because that looks like fun science. You know, why didn't I do that sort of thing? But yeah, I like that. Well, we're coming towards the end here, and I did get one more question related to that. When do we prune our evergreens? Now, if we're looking at the foundation evergreens, the yews, the junipers, the arborvitaes, really we shear those kind of in the spring, and we back away from that at this time of year when it's hot. If we had a cool, wet June, which we sometimes do, you could continue it. But right now, no, we're done with shearing our evergreens at this point. Now, if you're talking your pine trees, pines produce a candle. And that candle, which has these real short needles on it, now's the time to shear pines. And you do that by just breaking the candle at any point of its length. And you want to do that before the new needles are half the size of the mature needles. And so for a lot of our evergreen pruning, we're past, but no, right now it's pine time. And it's a good time to go out and shear those, not prune them heavily, but shear, by that removing a portion of the candle. We do that a lot with mugo pines. Maybe next week I'll do a little show on that. The other question was, when do we prune lilacs? Now, if you're just a little shaping them, we usually do that right after they're finished flowering, and that helps reduce seed production and gets them started on the next year. But if you're going to do heavy pruning, we usually recommend doing that in the spring, even though you're going to forfeit some flowers. Now is not the time with this heat to do a lot of heavy pruning. Any of that growth that comes back from it is going to have a tough time with all this heat. Well, we're just at about the end of it. So I would like to thank all our panelists for tonight. Amanda Bachman for helping talk to us about the pollinators and a number of other little critters she's seen. And you can actually see her in person at McCrory Gardens this Thursday night. Is that correct, Amanda? Did I have that right? You're doing that in person?
Yes. Yep. I will be there in person.
All right. So join the mob and come on out that night. It'll be a warm one, but I haven't seen a lot of mosquitoes. It's been dry. So I think it'll be a good night for that. And obviously, Christina is helping to set that up at McCrory Gardens. And we always enjoy having her come on and tell us what's going on at the gardens, because I don't care how hot it is. It's really cool to go to the gardens. And then Rhoda, who just enlightened us with water droplets on leaves. I'm thinking about that tonight, as well as some of the other stuff. So I really appreciate all our panelists' efforts tonight. And again, if we did answer all the questions that came in, but if a question comes up we do have that garden hotline, and they're there to help you answer your questions. And if they can't answer it, they sometimes toss them to us. And hopefully one of us is going to be able to get back to you with an answer to your question. So with that, we'll close as we always do at the 8 p.m. hour or 7 p.m. if you're on Western time. We'll see you next week, and I'm sure it's going to be another hot, dry week around the state. So probably the most common thing we'll tell you next week is to water, but if it's a fuzzy plant, don't water the leaves. So with that, thank you again for joining us for this hour. Have a good evening, everyone.